Parents, what's the weirdest thing you've come home to find the babysitter doing? I came home to find the babysitter had left. One kid was 2 and the other was 6 months old. Fortunately they were asleep, but I still couldn't believe it. Kinda the opposite. The parents came home to me taking a picture of their refrigerator. The husband has written "I love good frisky beaver" for fun in magnetic letters and forgot about it until they saw me taking a picture. The better move would have been to rearrange the letters to say something just slightly different, like hairy instead of frisky. Once when I was like 13 and babysitting at my aunt's house, I preheated the oven to make the kids dinner. Unfortunately, I didn't notice that the oven was full of Tupperware, a bunch of plastic bowls. Needless to say, that was a bad move on my part. We had a friend's daughter looking after the kids for the first time, and when we got home, she had reorganized almost everything in the house, not just a shelf or two. Like everything after she left, my wife and I spent quite a bit of time walking around, finding other things she had been into. The kitchen was completely reordered. Closets had different things in them. All of my CDs, DVDs, etc. I was very anal about how that stuff was organized back then. What she did drove me nuts. There wasn't a particular, obvious pattern to what she'd done either. No clear system that made sense to us. Just random, unintuitive changes. It was super creepy. We never called her again. She had brought her laptop and had been doing a striptease on cam. Working 2 jobs at the same time. When I was 8 years old, my parents went out to dinner. They left me and my sister, 5, with a babysitter who happened to be my friend's sister. We were always pretty self-contained kids, so we were quietly playing with our toys and having a good time. The babysitter was only really there to make sure we didn't hurt ourselves, but apparently she wanted to be more involved. At about 9 PM, she screams for us to come into the living room. She then tells us that she saw a man outside wearing a mask and looking through the windows, and tells us to get down and be very quiet. I want to reiterate that I was 8 years old and had a 5-year-old sister, and we were told a criminal was outside by an authority figure. So we get down on the floor, insanely scared. We're there for about 10 minutes when we hear the handle of the door turning. My sister is silently sobbing. Our parents then walk in, asked what was going on, and then never hired that girl again. That babysitter is a terrible person. Long-time babysitter here. Once a kid's parents walked in on him licking carpet because I dared him to. They had a good laugh and still refer to it when they see me. This is not my story, thankfully. My good friend has a very rocky relationship with her mother-in-law. Not to the point that they would ever not see her. They all live in the same city, but definitely bad enough that I hear new insane mother-in-law stories every week. Her mill is way too attached to her husband. In a cut the umbilical cord already way. So, when they had their son, a lot of that was transferred to the baby. Things like calling the baby by my friend's husband's name and saying things like "You love grandma so much more than mommy and daddy, don't you?" Just a bit creepy and irritating. My friend and her husband went out for supper drinks when the baby was about 4 months old, leaving the mother-in-law to babysit. They came home early because my friend twisted her ankle, and everything was dark. No TV, no lights, nothing. They can hear the white noise in their son's room, and hear the rocking chair squeaking away. So, they go back to investigate, not turning any lights on or calling out as they go. Thinking it must have been a rough night with the baby, mother-in-law must be trying to get him back to sleep. The baby's door is open, and the nightlight in the hall was on so they can see into their son's room, and see mother-in-law, in the rocking chair with the baby, with her shirt pulled up, and her breast in the baby's mouth. The baby was fast asleep, latched onto grandma's saggy boobs. Needless to say, friend and hubby freak out. Mother-in-law cries, says she just wanted the baby to love her. They kick her out of the house, and as my friend says, have years of cringe-worthy images in their heads to try and drink away. TLDR. Friends come home to find mother-in-law with nipple in baby's mouth. This just scared the living frick out of me. You just described my mill to a T. My baby is just about 4 months old as well, and my husband doesn't understand why I won't let his batshit mom watch our baby without his dad around. It doesn't help that she accidentally calls herself mommy and her husband daddy when talking to the baby. I'm creeped. Shivers. My dad came home to my older sister crying and the babysitter on the porch smoking crack. Thankfully he forgot something so he turned around on his way to work, or who knows what would have happened. Another babysitter peed on my parents' carpet while she was watching a movie with my sister. Well, when I was young I had a babysitter who was awesome at pretending and seemed really into the stories I would make up for my toys. A few years later my father received a phone call at 3 AM. It was my babysitter claiming that the men on CNN are trying to kill me. They are trying to kill me with the anthrax. My dad called the cops. Apparently they found her on the ground in her house, in an adult diaper, topless, holding a phone book and crying for her mommy. Yet it turns out the reason she was so awesome at pretending was because she was not pretending. She was completely bat crap crazy. Sounds like unchecked unmedicated schizophrenia. I once came home to my twin sister, gleefully tying up Pat the awesome babysitter dude. He was on the phone with his girlfriend and figured it would keep my sister occupied. So what was the harm? The harm being that when there's one twin, the other one is eventually going to come back from the circus. And that twin knows where the rest of the clothesline rope is. And the yarn. We had him eventually so wrapped up that he could hardly move. Then he got off the phone and asked us to untie him. Now why would we do that? He got a little mad and finally gave us the ultimatum: untie him now, or he would call my parents from the phone we foolishly tied to his hand in our 8-year-old glee. He would give us to the count of 3, and then they were getting a call. After about 5 minutes of haggling with us, he finally started the countdown, 1, 2, and that's when my parents walked in at that very minute. I am a 30-year-old male, but when I was in middle high school I did a lot of babysitting and had a few regulars. This is the last time I babysat for one of them. I was very sick, but they called and asked me to babysit. I advised them I was sick but would do it if they really needed me to. They said they did, so I went over. They had 3 daughters, and the middle one was also sick. So I went through the normal routines and got them to bed, but the middle one just wouldn't stay down. So I said she could watch a movie with me, as I wasn't up for anything else. Well, I flicked through the cable channels and found a kid-friendly movie, and laid down on the couch. Well, due to my illness I promptly fell asleep. I guess in my sleep the 5-year-old crawled up on me and fell asleep on top of me. And there we were till the parents came home. And in the meantime the movie changed from a kid-friendly one to a very adult one. And the parents came home to me on the couch, with their 5-year-old on top of me, with a steamy scene in a movie playing on their big screen. They didn't really listen to my explanations. They drove me home. This was before I could drive, and never called me again. I felt terrible, and they were a great family to babysit for. Their daughters liked me, and were easy to handle, and their house was a nice place to chill after the kids went to sleep. Maybe they misunderstood you when you said you were really sick. Built a 4 feet tall house of cards around my sleeping 1-year-old. That's when I realized we have way more playing cards than any human should ever own. I know I'm kind of late, but I was a single child and my mother was a H addict and she had left me with a friend on New Year's Eve to go out, but she had paid him in H and told him not to do it while he was watching me. Obviously that didn't happen. And he took all of it and started to nod off and OD. I was in 7th grade and had my best friend over, and I knew all about it. Long childhood, another story for another day, and I knew he was probably going to die if I didn't do something. After panicking for a few minutes I decided I had to figure it out. So I took him in the bathroom, stripped him naked, and put him under a cold shower and started slapping him in the face. He was staying conscious, which was nice. Eventually I knew he would get too cold and I had to do something else, so dried him off and got him dressed again and formulated a plan. We didn't have a phone in the house so I knew I couldn't ask a neighbor to call without them finding out my mom's addiction, so I decided on going to a payphone. Remember those? In the area. It was freezing out and I figured as long as he was moving he wouldn't die, so I scrounged up some change and told my friend, who was freaking out, that he was suffering an allergic reaction to a medication and I needed to get him help and I would be right back. We stepped out into the blustering cold and started walking. He was still completely out of it and was falling all over the place. I lived in a semi-suburban area and it was an arduous journey to the closest place I though would have a payphone. As it turns out, grocery stores don't have readily accessible phones outside, but he was coming to a little bit, so I started the walk back. tears streaming down my face and chapping my cheeks. Finally we got back to the house and I was confident he wouldn't OD, so I sat him down in a chair in the kitchen and sat across from him and just watched him to make sure he survived. My friend had fallen asleep and it was well past 2 in the morning, my mother not returning for another hour or so. Without pouring into another story, he still thanks me to this day, I'm in my 20s, for saving his life. Unfortunately he's serving a 5-year sentence for issues related to his addiction. Man, it really felt nice to get that out. I've never really talked about my crappy childhood, which subsequently made me who I am. The best part is no one will see this because it's such a long front page post and I'll be way at the bottom. : Whoa, dude, you had your crap together for a 7th grader. Well done. Giving the baby whiskey, definitely. My dad used to rub a tiny bit on my gums when I was a baby and teething. He said it worked wonders. Of course it wasn't enough to cause any problems. She cleaned the house and folded laundry. I am not a parent, but I was babysitting a young boy down the street from me that my family was good friends with when I was 13. The boy is autistic, but not severely, so I knew what I was getting into when I said I would babysitting. Welp, turns out I was wrong. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The kid ran circles around me all night, threw huge tantrums when I tried to put him in bed, hide anywhere he could find, and most of all, bit me hard. I had to get him under control, so I waited until he directed his tornado of autistic terror into the kitchen pantry, which I knew held mommy's secret chocolate stash. He took the bait and went into the pantry, and as he was reaching for the candy, I shut the door behind him. Well, turns out 13-year-old me is terrible at forming diabolical plans because the kid went apeshit, screaming, hitting his hands on the door, and knocking things down before I even had a chance to open the door. TLDR, my family friends came home to me releasing their child from a closet, who promptly attacked them in a tornado of autistic frenzy. I was never hired by them again. You know what? Frick those parents, they should have given you tactics to use to help control him. They know their child and how his condition affects his behavior. They should have prepared you better. Their fault, not yours. When my sister and I were younger, we had an absolute favorite babysitter. We would play goofy games like we'd run around the house and she would grab us up and put us in like prison on the kitchen table. My mom came home one day to see my sister screaming and running around the house and me laughing my butt off standing on the kitchen table. It was bizarre, but we had so much fun. Whenever I babysit, I do the exact same thing. It's incredible how easily children are amused. Just chase them around for some time, then let them chase you around for a while, jokingly acting scared, and they'll laugh their asses off. Stark naked doing her laundry, did not want to be rude by borrowing a robot towel, but using our washing machine and dryer was okay. Sitting butt naked all over our furniture, that too was okay, but no borrowing a robot towel, too freaking impolite. I feel like I have seen that movie. I used to babysit 2 mentally challenged twins of 9 who were really difficult to deal with. One was extremely competitive. He would claim that one day he'd be strong enough to kill me. The other would usually just be completely zoned out until his twin pee him off. Suddenly he would become really angry and attack. One night he grabbed a letter opener. The parents later came home to me sitting on the stairs as a barrier. The competitive twin angrily stuck upstairs, and the spacey one zoned out on the couch. Neither can live while the other survives. The battle that began in the womb continues until there is only one. There can only be one. I'm the babysitter. The weirdest may have been me in showdown with their youngest. He was 4 at the time. See, the boys were brats, and the younger one, when in trouble, would throw a monster fit. But it would always boil down to him just standing there screaming, yelling in a straight monotone while looking you dead in the eye, waiting for you to give up, just to make the noise stop. But he miscalculated. I am also a younger sibling, and I am the undisputed queen on annoying noises in my family. Thus, the lines were drawn. Every time he got up from his timeout, or made a noise, the timeout clock reset to 5 minutes. Every time he tried to escape and play, it was a few minutes of yelling for him to realize I wasn't gonna budge. So his parents came home to us standing across the playroom from each other, him hollering like he couldn't breathe without screaming, and me just dead staring him with the kitchen timer in hand. The only time that family ever tipped, not for the hitting, the kicking, or the biting, not for forks or blocks or baseballs thrown at my head, just for the one time they caught the yelling. I stopped babysitting for them after that. If you know your kids are awful, you need to sweeten the deal, cause I don't think none of the other neighborhood girls will sit for them anymore, either. I babysat for a kid like that once. 2 boys, both just awful. My sister had babysat for them before and she's very shy and wouldn't get them in trouble. I'm different. So bedtime comes around and the kid starts screaming and yelling and won't go to bed. He happens to be sitting on a blanket, so I just dragged him and the blanket down the hall, into his room, and shut the door. Not a parent, but one time while we were in France, I was probably 9ish. My sisters were like 6 and 3. My parents went out to dinner and left us with a babysitter they had found through a local agency. I was old enough to handle myself, but they figured being in a foreign country and having such a young child they should have someone there anyways. I don't remember anything from that experience, but from what my parents tell me, they came home to find the babysitter upstairs in one of the bedrooms on her phone. My youngest sister on the floor bleeding because she had waddled into a table and fallen and cut her head, and the other 2 of us hiding in the bathroom. Well, for my parents it would be my babysitter in the middle of throwing up while pretty drunk. She was a good friend of the family and I was probably 8 at the time. I had been mixing rum and cokes for her all night, pretty much half and half. She asked me why it tasted funny since it was a bit strong and I said it was the knockoff coke my mum buys. My parents thought it was hilarious since I had taken this opportunity to watch horror films. I wish more 8-year-olds could make a good stiff drink. Gone. Hired a 14-year-old neighbor girl to watch my then 3-year-old daughter for 3 hours. I came home and daughter was alone on kitchen floor. More about that in a sec. So I'm like, where the heck is the babysitter? Called her mom and she said, oh. I yelled for her to come home because it was getting dark, and she went. Turns out she never told her mom she was babysitting. Anyhow, my daughter was fine. She was just sitting on the floor with a big pan. In the pan she had cracked 48 eggs and was mixing them in the bowl. It was close to Easter and I had bought them for the kids of the family to color. Anyhow, moral of story, be careful of young teen babysitters and learn to love omelets. My ex-husband. Pretty rude for him to be in your house when you aren't married anymore. I babysit 3 kids between the ages of 3 and 11. It's great, but babysitting kids sometimes makes you do the silliest things. One time the 3-year-old went to get a piece of cheese out of the fridge, but she doesn't just grab it and go. She goes, almost, completely inside of the fridge to get it. I decided that it would be funny to slowly shut the fridge door and make it into a little game of UHO. Better hurry. Right as I had the door almost shut, it wouldn't be able to shut all the way with her in there anyway. Her parents walk in through the side door, the faces directly in front of the fridge. Not sure when was going through their mind when they saw the babysitter shutting their toddler, who is hysterically giggling, in the fridge, but they had a laugh. Paid me, and I still babysit them to this day, so it couldn't have affected my reputation that much. A friend's dad lost his virginity to his babysitter after convincing her to play strip poker with him. He was 11, and she was 18. My mom hired a babysitter for my sister once. I thought she was nice. One day she wasn't there anymore. My mother told me she'd been fired. I said AWW, that's not fair, she was awesome. My mother explained she had been taking my sister to her house during the day, then bringing her back in the afternoon before my parents got home. I was still too young to really understand what was wrong with that picture, so I questioned why that was so bad. My mom said, let's take a drive. We drove about 10 minutes and ended up in a trailer park with people smoking blunts on their front steps, pregnant women everywhere, and no 2 consecutive teeth to be found in a single person's mouth. This is where she lives. When I was around 5/6, my dad left me with a babysitter who bit my lip, made me drink mouthwash for adults and pee in the kitchen sink. Some weird memories. I told my dad. She never babysat again. You have been visited by the safety doggo. Subscribe and you will be safe from all danger for the next 24 hours. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.